Hi there. Welcome to our webinar. Today, our special topic and our special guest. We're doing heart-to-heart pet bird behavior with Chris Davis. So welcome, everybody. Chris, of course, welcome you. How's it going there?
Very nice. Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for showing up today.
All right. Hey, while we wait for people to log in,
Yeah.
you know, the holidays are now it's December already. Can you believe it? Just wondering, like, you know, people tend to transform their homes inside with decorations and trees and wreaths and ornaments and stuff. Is there anything is there any kind of like thing we should take in consideration with or how our flock mixes in with that, like, you know, as far as making them feel comfortable and
You mean like giving our best feathered friends in the world a heart attack because of this
all of a sudden a tree
lit up object in the middle of the living room
next to their cage all of a sudden.
Yes, you know, no, I've actually seen that where feather picking would get started and stuff, especially in the old days, where people would just set up this big tree and light it up, and you know, and the birds there making the sign of the cross and going, "Oh my God, I'm going to die at any moment." And so yes, they have to be careful of this. And I used to work as an animal health technician in an emergency ward for animals, you know, of course. And I remember one year, and this doesn't have to do with birds, but most people have dogs and cats and other things, you know, other types of animals as well. We had the same little dachshund puppy show up. He was like maybe 5 pounds, and he'd eaten a 1 pound fruitcake.
Oh. No one should eat a 1 pound fruitcake, but
yeah, but I mean, it was a tiny little dog and he'd eaten a 1 pound fruitcake. And then the next time we saw him, he'd eaten the foil off of another, because they were putting them under the tree. And you know, the dog's going, "Thanks," and eating them, and then ending up with this huge emergency bill.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so with birds especially, we have to remember that it is a foreign object to them. And I think having them be part of that, I'm glad you brought this up because I didn't even think about it, but having them be part of the whole display process. And you can, like, if you're bringing in a tree, explain to them that you're going to be bringing in a tree. They might not know what a Christmas tree is, but they'll know that you're telling them about a change, and they'll be expecting a change. So then you say, well, "I'm going to bring in the tree," and then you let them kind of see it from far away. I would not put it where it was close to them. And if you have to, I'd even cover that side of their cage, especially as you were bringing the tree in, setting it up and all that. Mm-hmm. And then just let them see the bare tree for a day or so, you know, and just say, "Oh, this is a tree, you know, and that's our Christmas tree. We're going to fix it up." And then have them watch you fix it up. And I think that as they do that, then they go, "Oh, okay, this is not going to, in the middle of the night, sneak over here and kill me and eat me," you know, and or there's not going to be a hawk leaping out of it and grabbing me in the middle of the night. So it's one of those things where you make them part of the family all the time. And when you do that and you just explain things to them like you would to a small child, like, don't climb the Christmas tree. But the thing with them also is, if you do have a very inquisitive bird, really be careful, because they will fly over and they will nibble on things, and that you know, they're usually strung with lights, and then there's all kinds of toxic, you know, it's like at Christmas time to think, what's the most toxic things we can invent that will kill the most animals? I know, you know, like glass ornaments and silver stuff and lots of electrical cord, you know, really thin electrical cord that a bee can bite through fast. So all these things are things that we have to think about. When we do it, we introduce them to it. And if you have to, even for your dogs or your kids or your bird, I'd suggest that people get one of those cute little fences that you can just stick up and move, you know, little plastic gates. We've used that for toddlers before, where we put it in front of the bird so that the toddler just can't come closer to the bird without a real effort, you know. And then as the child gets older and they're used to it, you can take it down. But I like to do that with dogs and then with birds too, just so that if you have a bird that's padding all over the house, you know, you always keep an eye on them. And around this time of year also, I tell people to really, and Halloween too, keep an eye on them, because times when they usually would just sit there and be fine, if you decide to turn on the Christmas tree lights, or or you have flashing lights like this, what's going to happen is that bird could panic, fall to the floor, and injure themselves, or you could start them becoming like a PTSD thing where they're feather picking or whatever. So and then as far as toxicity, again, making sure that everything's swept up in any of the areas that they go. Make sure there's no fumes. Birds get 6 to 8 times what we do from a breath, because they don't just, the air doesn't just go into their lungs, it goes into the long bones. And so that's why they have the hollow bones, but the air actually goes into those bones. And they've actually done surgery on birds, like on the throats and things, and when they've had to get around, the trachea, and they've actually put oxygen into the air sacs in the inguinal area down by their hips, right above their legs. And they've fed the oxygen in there so that they could work on birds that had some sort of occlusion here or some problem. So they get way more of whatever's in the air. So be careful about those wonderfully fragrant Christmas candles, and even a fresh tree. We use now a false tree because we only have a narrow place and I need to sit up narrow. But I would be careful. I would take it out first, maybe air it out, in another room, just in case. You don't know if they've come from some other country. A lot of times they go in, they use like a bug bomb or something before, something to keep down any insects coming into this country from another one. So if you can open it up into another room, if it's a false one, or if it's a real one, maybe hose it off down outside,
Make sure there's no owl in it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there could be anything in there. There was where was it? Oh, in Australia. I just read that somebody found a koala in their Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Their Christmas tree, boom, there's a koala in it. It's probably going, what the heck, So yeah. So
those are good points, definitely.
Yeah, and they're all things we do have to think about. And then also, wintertime, if you have your bird in an area where you usually keep it closed because it's cold, but maybe right now with the pandemic, we're not having that many people come in and out. But if it's an area where you're going to have company, things like that, I like to move the bird to an area where they're more comfortable and then bring them out to see the company rather than, or to see bringing in the cage or the tree or whatever. I'd rather remove them from that area and then to have them, you tell them you're going to be bringing in a tree, you're going to set up, and then you bring them in with you and you're petting them or holding them and say, I just put a beautiful tree, and they might be a little bit afraid. Oh, I put up that tree for you, and so they think every Christmas, oh, the tree's put up for me, Little Frankie the budgie has got his own tree.
Oh, those are really good points. Hopefully that'll help make the holidays safer for the whole household, birds and humans. So if you're just joining us, you're with the our special webinar, the Heart-to-Heart Pet Bird Behavior Q&A with Chris Davis. So just a couple reminders, because I know we're gonna have a lot of questions, Chris, because come on, everyone loves you. If you have a question, please use the Q&A button and not the chat feature. That way we can capture the question better. And also just a quick announcement, we're gonna do another raffle prize. So one lucky viewer is going to win the new bag of tropical fruit pellets, as well as a bag of Lafeber food of your bird's choice. So stay tuned for that. We'll announce that later on. But so do you have any, let's see, should we dive into questions right now, or do you have anything that you wanted to?
I thought it might be fun just to explain real quickly how behavior modification got started for birds. I started working with birds specifically. I trained my first animal, which was a dog, when I was 12, and I'm now 74. So that was a long time ago, but I was always interested in behavior. My grandmother rescued birds her whole life, parrots, everything else. And then what happened was that when I started working with parrots, I found out that no one believed in the late 70s, in the mid 70s, I guess it was, no one believed that they could be worked with. They thought they were too stupid to be worked with. And it astounded me because I was seeing such wisdom and such intelligence, even in the smallest of them. And I thought, this isn't right. And we were working, of course, at the time with mostly wild parrots. There were very few hand-fed, domestically bred babies around. And so they were mostly wild, and people had these expectations of these wild animals becoming their best friend. Well, that would be like pulling, some wild animal into your house from God knows where, and then expecting him to be really happy because you took him away from everything he loved and everything he knew, and put him through hell, through quarantine and shipping and all these other things and capture. And so I really realized that people had to have a way of working with them. And since I had not ever, when I was a child, I didn't know any children until I went to kindergarten. We lived we're surrounded by ranch and orange groves, cattle ranch, a working cattle ranch and orange groves. And my friends were animals. That's my primary social group. And I know I've said this before, but I have always seen animals as being my only reality. That's my whole life pivots around them. And I love my friends and, help people all the time, everything, but animals are what my heart belongs to, and I can't help it. So when I saw these birds being terrified by coming in, I thought, that's the thing. I thought everybody saw them the same way I did. I thought they understood what the bird was thinking, that he was terrified because he'd been through terrible things to get here. And he was a wild animal, and many of them were older. You could tell they'd already had babies. They're mates that they would have mated with their whole life. They've been separated from them. Babies would come in, and often, they have broken wings or broken legs or whatever, because people cut down trees to get them, trees that the birds had used for literally decades and decades. And so we were seeing things like that even in the babies. We were seeing birds that would be packed into cages, and they'd bite each other's toes off because the cages would have just one wall. And so when he put his feet through it, the bird in the next cage would just nip the toes off. And so here you have these birds that literally been tortured. Most of them, I think, had PTSD, looking back on it now, which was a term we didn't use back then. But I think that people did not see them as intelligent creatures. They just saw them. Why is it screaming? Why is it biting? Why won't it let me be? Doesn't it know I paid X amount of dollars for it? It doesn't care about money, and when I found that when I could explain to them what the bird had been through, if the person got really quiet, and often, most of the time they'd cry or they'd get tears in their eyes, I knew I had changed that bird's life forever, and I had changed theirs. And I knew also that I'd opened a door to where they could interact now with the bird on a level that the bird needed, not their needs or wants of, I want him to be this way, I want him to kiss me like the birds on TV and all this other stuff. No, he's been put through hell to get here.
Yeah.
You now have to communicate with him, because all he knows, and this is what I would tell people, all he knows, not thinks, all he knows from millions of years of evolution, from when, he was along with the reptiles and everything else, was that he was going to be killed and eaten. Mm. That's all he knew. He didn't know anything else. And so when people had him like this, that's all he thought was, when you're going to kill and eat me. I've had all these bad things happen to me. When are you going to do it? And people weren't seeing that. And once they could see it, and once I'd see their faces change, I knew that no matter how frustrated they were, because I'd come in and I get a lot of times, they're like following me, or I'm following them into the living room or something from the front door, and I'm getting this full litany of how this bird's misbehaving. And all he's doing is behaving as he would have behaved 100,000 years ago. He's behaving in a way that helped his species survive since the beginning of time. And when I could have people see that and see what had been done against this bird and against his will, then they had the patience to start working with them, to understand they were dealing with another intelligent being, And so once they knew that, and once they understood all that they'd taken away, because we wanted him to be a certain way and he couldn't be that way, then they were willing to work with the bird. And then that's where the birds would start to come around. It was because the people changed. And that's what I see, is that as we become more educated with it, and it doesn't have to be one particular way of working with them, because different people respond better to different types of working. So some people work better with cut and dried rules. Boom, 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 boom. You do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. I tend to be more freewheeling. I tend to feel what they're feeling and watch how they're behaving, see how they're reacting to the world around them. I'm noticing everything that's going on in the environment. When I go in, I've been in over 2,000 homes. This is before I was doing phone consultations. And I've been in the homes with the people. And can I tell just a real quick story, and then we'll get into questions, because this, I think, is a perfect example. Get another drink of water. I also had some caffeine, so I'm going to be rattling like crazy. I'm going to be like, I'm like, get kind of a budgie thing going. But anyway, so what happened was years ago, I went into a woman's house, and some people may have heard this story before, but it's a very good example of how birds, when they're with us, they fall into a flock behavior, even if there's only one other person, or their mate or their flock. You know, I mean, that's it. I went into their home because they had a blue and gold macaw, and the woman, he was a woman's bird. He'd been a wonderful companion. All of a sudden, he was becoming quite aggressive, and she didn't know why. And it was just toward her, and he was starting to favor her husband. And so she and I were talking. I was taking a history, and I was writing down everything. And the whole time, I would always be watching everybody in the house and everything in the house, every animal in the house, like if there was a Christmas tree up, or if they had a house where traffic was going by, whatever, I would be watching all this, but they didn't know it. I mean, it wasn't, like I'm casing the joint, as they say, but it would be where I just wanted to see all the influences that the bird was going on in his environment or her environment. And so while I was writing all this down with the woman, and she seemed really hurt about this, which we all are when our birds aren't loving toward us. And her husband wasn't there. It was an afternoon appointment. Usually they were in the evenings because people would be returning from work. But this was in the afternoon because the problem was with her. And she wanted to have this kind of private thing, where she could be really open. So her husband happened to stop by. And because he had a big company where he'd have to go around checking on things. And so he came by, big jovial guy, funny, everything else. And he came by, we chatted for about 10 minutes. And we're all laughing, everything else, because he was hilarious. And after he left, and I heard his truck drive away, I said to the woman, I said, this is none of my business. But has your husband been beating you, hitting you, beating you? And she said, yes. And I said, that's the problem. I said, you're the weak member of the flock. He's the strong one. He has to survive. He's going to be like the man. He's going to be Mr. Macho Bird now, because you're the weak member of the flock. If he's with you, predators are going to see and come get him. You're bringing him into a dangerous place. And that's what he was seeing. So she and I talked a bit after that about different things. And I told her, I said, that's just the way it is. And then, I chatted, I said, you have to think about, this is your life. And is this the type of life that you want? And so anyway, several months later, I got a letter from her, and she thanked me. She'd left the marriage. She took the bird with her. She left the marriage. She started getting some help, which I often recommend to people if they're going through something like that, because it's a hard thing to go through by yourself. And I thought, she was getting some counseling and things like that. So she knew how to deal with her feelings and knew how not to, or was learning how not to get into that type of relationship in the future. But the bird was the one who told me, And the bird told me from the way he behaved when the man came in the room. It was just like he got real tough and real strutting around and and I was laughing and talking with him. I didn't let on any of my feelings. I was just watching things, because if I'd acted like I was concerned, then the bird's going to get even more weird, and it'd be because of me. So I wanted to kind of fit in and, was chatting and laughing with him and everything else. And the woman was laughing, we were all talking. And then when he left, I thought, ding, I mean, it was like right on the button. And I asked her, and that's what was going on. So we are their world. And especially now that we have mostly hand-fed, domestically bred babies that have not been bred to be out in the wild. They prefer, most of them, if they've been raised well, they prefer being with people. They really do. And where other ones, maybe they'd rather be with other birds. That's an individual thing. But I love that story because it tells you how much we affect them. And the bird, when he finally went with her and she was getting the counseling and everything, because that was one of the things I had suggested, was that she get counseling. And she said he was fine. Once she was on her own, not in that situation any longer, he went back to being her pal.
Amazing. Wow.
So behavior, the reason I started with behavior was because I was working at Universal Studios in the Animal Act, and I was also working for the same trainer at Lion Country Safari, which was around until the early 80s or something. I worked there in the late 70s. And the thing that I saw was that the one reason that birds were given up, the main reason, way far above anything else, the reason that people were getting rid of their birds was behavior problems. Almost every one of them was behavior problems. And all I wanted to do, I thought, God, we've put these poor things through hell. We've got to give them a good life. And that's how behavior modification for birds started, because at the time, they did not have it. It did not exist. You could train them to do this or that. You could take a wild bird. I can take a wild bird and next week have them riding a bicycle, but you don't want to train them that way. You're starving them and all this other stuff. I just didn't like that. I raised my animals like I raised kids. There's boundaries that are clear, and then I give them a lot of leeway in between. But there's certain things you do not violate, and that's that. And everybody's happy. And that's what I like to help people. I want the bird to be part of your family. I want you to be part of the bird's life as much as he's part of yours.
Nice.
That's what I want.
Instead of
she'll be out here in just a little while, but I've got a 40-year-old Amazon that's mi corazón. She's my heart. And, she's been with me all this time. Gosh, I've got here right now, I've got my two girls all dressed up for Christmas. I've got my puppy girls and my other one that weighs a ton. But they're with me, but that's what broke my heart, every 15 years or so with a dog. That's what, with birds, you have somebody that you can pass to your children later.
Wow, that's a great point. And plus, you hate to see birds that people get them and then they're basically a pet that's just fed and watered, and it's just to see them like that it's unfortunate.
It's heartbreaking because they're so interactive. That's part of their lives. That's their life, is to be part of a flock. And if you hold them away from that, you're going to have behavior problems.
Yeah.
You're their flock, and you owe them. You owe them. They don't owe you anything. People think, well, I bought him. He doesn't care. He doesn't care how much you spent. It's we decide to take this incredibly intelligent animal into our lives. We've got a responsibility, and I do tell people, you've got a responsibility probably for the rest of your life if you get if you're lucky.
Yeah. All right. I think we have some questions popping up for you. Let's say, let me see let's see here what we got. Our questions from, let's see here. Okay. So MacArthur asks, now that I'm working from home, my African gray screeches when she knows I'm in the next room working and don't have her out with me the whole day. She's out for a couple hours each afternoon when I can have her out, but she can't be out the whole day. How do I convince her not to scream?
Okay. What you have to do is establish a little schedule with her while you're in the home. So what you would do is have it be where she understands that, okay, you get up in the morning, you get set up for your work, whatever you're doing in your home office or whatever you're kind of doing for the day. You bring her out during a certain period. And that might be for her to have, to eat. You might want to get a little side perch or something to put her on in your office, or a smaller cage just to put her in there when she's with you. And then what you do is you say, okay, it's time to go into the other room. You take her in there. I would probably put the radio on low, or I would put on a TV programs like, I used to love Sesame Street for the birds because they loved it. Anyway, so things like that, something to kind of keep her occupied a bit. But it also, if he's doing some sort of work where he's working on a computer, or he's talking on the phone, or he or she, being whomever the person happens to be, that way they're not hearing his or her voice from the other room. They're more focused on what's going around right where they are. The other thing is that there are some exercises you can do, and it cracks me up because everybody likes to criticize everybody else. And it's so funny because, like I tell everybody, hey, if it's humane and it gets the job done, different types of behavior for different people. What I have found is the thing of covering the bird while it's screaming works very well, but it doesn't work very well if you're coming from another room, stomping in there, walking up to the bird and covering his cage because he made you come to him. No, what we always did was we would have the bird's cage partially covered while the bird was in it. We'd have, wherever the person was coming from the other room to correct the behavior, they could drop the rest of the cover over the other side without the bird seeing it.
Oh.
And then you let them be covered for like 5 minutes. Then you come in, you uncover it, talk to them a little bit, whatever. You walk out, if they scream, boom, cover it again. But you don't let them see you coming in, because then that way they're not getting, because they're so visual. So remember that whenever you're doing something, like if you do go into the room while your bird is screaming, you have just rewarded his behavior. That's it. I mean, he sees that as a reward. He got 100-some-odd pound person to come in. I mean, and he weighs a pound, he's a gray, but so that's the thing, is to make it where it's not worth his while, but to also give him some form of entertainment. And then when it's convenient for the person, if they can have a little bit of a schedule, what will happen is the bird would then click into that schedule, say, okay, when dad is home, I come out maybe in the morning while I'm eating or right after eating, and then I'm with him for an hour or whatever while he's working, or a half hour, and then he puts me back in the cage. And what I do with that sort of situation is, usually if I have them on a perch with the person, I don't have food there for them then. So they're ready for a snack. When you put them back in, they're ready for a snack and they get a little hungry. And then also remember that between 12 and 2 or 3, somewhere between there, 12 or 1 and then 2 or 3, so it's usually about an hour and a half, 2-hour time between those times that birds take a little siesta. And so that it's important for him to have the bird in its cage before they siesta, because then the bird's more apt to become quiet and stay quiet in there, and then you're reinforcing the quiet. Now, when the bird's being quiet, the man should come from the other room, or the person should come from the other room. Hi, how you doing? Scratch his head, give him a little goodie or something, a little treat. And then that way the bird says, the other thing is to tell him, because they understand words if they've been with you their whole lives, especially. So if you say, I like when you're quiet. You're a good boy or good girl. I like when you're quiet. I'm going to give you this, and you give them a Nutri-Berry or something, but you give them a treat. Just a little, it doesn't have to be, people go and give them like big crackers and tell them that's like you eating like, a picnic table. I mean, it's like, and so, but give him a little something that he really likes. And then he'll think, well, oh, I get treats. If I'm out here and I'm quiet, I get treats. If I screech, I get covered, and I don't like that because I can't see anything. And no words, anything. You just go boom, because he knows better at this point. He knows you don't want him to scream. But he's getting, I'm willing to bet that he's getting intermittently rewarded. And we've all done it. Even trainers have done it, where the bird's just on a roll one day, you come stomping in from the other room, and they're like, ha, got you to come in, and the whole time trainers are kicking themselves for it, because we're going, we know better than this, it's just a moment.
So would you say one of the slip ups that people might do is to yell at their bird to be quiet, because then you're kind of defeating the purpose of your bird trying to be quiet.
What do birds do when they're happy or in their flock? They scream their brains out, and there's no way you can yell louder than your bird. And to them, it's not just the yelling, it's the emotion behind it. They like drama, especially if you have an Amazon, a crazy macaw, a conure, they like that kind of, let's rumble. And the poor person is stuck with, the screaming bird. And so that's the thing, is to understand the personalities of your birds. A gray is usually less confrontational. Grays are the intellectual. So you sit there and they think about things, where if an Amazon's climbing up their cage and they happen to fall, they go, oh, well, first of all, let me say, if an African gray falls, he goes, or he's in an unfamiliar area where he may fall, he sits there thinking, oh my gosh, I'd be falling X number of inches. I weigh so much. It's going to mean that I could damage this on me. He's got it all figured out in his head. He's thinking about it. He's analyzing it. Boy, I hope I don't fall off here because I could really do some damage. An Amazon, they can climb all over the place. They drop and they go, whoa, what a rush. And then they climb back up again, and so there's different personalities. And it's important to understand the personalities when you're working with, just like kids, they can be different. They can be sisters. They can be twins. They can be totally different.
All right, that's a good take. So our next question comes from Susan. She says that my snooty neighbor's kids don't know how to train their newly acquired 2 young African grays. They are outside all day, and then they're brought in at night where they get attention but taught no manners. Is there anything I can give them? Any advice for Susan to give her neighbors?
Yeah, maybe find another home for the birds, but I don't think that would work. That's really hard. I would suggest maybe getting one of the good books that, there's a number of really good trainers out there and behavior consultants now, which I'm so thrilled that it took hold, because at the time I was on the fringe. But that's why I started speaking to veterinarians, and because I knew that people would be saying, I'm going to get rid of this bird because it's so noisy. And that's what started with, my business, was just the veterinarians going, yeah, and understanding, knowing that people are going to get rid of those birds. And I said, wouldn't you rather have that as a patient, or for the rest of your life as a veterinarian? So when you have 2 birds, the whole dynamics change, especially when they're the same age. It's different if they're different species or different ages, and you've had one longer than the other. The good thing is that if they do have the birds outside all day, it's really not very acceptable to do that unless the birds have enough room to really be comfortable and climb around and do all kinds of stuff. What I see is usually when they put them outside, the cage is too small. The other thing is that I have seen where people have not gotten home, and this is gruesome, so I'm warning everybody. I have literally seen where people have not gotten home in time. They had their birds in a cage on the patio. One person had their African gray's leg pulled off by a raccoon. Oh. And the bird bled to death. Susie, it's okay. The bird bled to death. So, and then I've also had where they had them in like a smaller dome type cage or a rectangular cage, but where the perch was really close to the top of the cage, and where the hawks have come through, and hawks will take their legs. People don't realize they use their legs like hands, and they will go and grab them. And even though they can't pull them through the thing, they can kill them. So maybe telling them that, but then also maybe getting them a book on bird behavior, getting one that's really simply written and where it's not a whole lot of regimented stuff, where, you know, an actual training thing, because it sounds like these are probably people who wouldn't do that. It sounds more like a book on behavior and just kind of general bringing up baby. You said bringing up baby consultations, in which you set the foundations for good behavior. And then the same foundations, basically, whether it's a bird foundation or it's dog or cat or whatever, or child. But they need some sort of, they're going to have problems later on if they don't. They're going to need some sort of assistance. And maybe if the neighbor says something along the lines of, you know, I know you've spent a lot of money on those birds. They're going to get so bonded to each other they won't be interested in you. You've got to become their flock. And you're probably, you know, I heard this talk by this lady, and she said, you're probably going to have some problems with them down the line. And that also these other things could happen, because raccoons will even, especially in the winter, come out during the daytime. And, you know, yeah. So I've seen it happen to more than one. I mean, more than one bird, but African gray whites, I remember that because it was just heartbreaking. I just thought the terror that they went through.
Oh.
I don't, you know, the pain and everything. Just, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to get Legolas? Okay. Yes, I was getting Legolas here. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
While we wait for Legolas, I have a question from Donald. He wants to know, how can a parent be encouraged with positive reinforcement to not bite? The bird gives no body language warning and isn't acting apparently out of fear. Thanks for your thoughts. So,
okay, I'll let you in on how I work with things. I'm interested in finding out what kind of bird it is. Okay. Because if it's an Amazon, if it's a conure, a certain, not all Amazons, not all conures, but certain breeds of them, that's how they express themselves: happiness, unhappiness, excitement. Sometimes you're just excited. So once you understand that, then what you do is you go out farther. So at first you say, okay, I've got an Amazon, or I've got a cockatiel.
Chris, I got it. It's an African gray. Just got that.
Oh, African gray. Good. Okay. African grays, they're the little intellects of the parrot. They're all intelligent, but African grays are like the professor with the tweed jacket and the leather elbows on their sleeves, and they overthink everything. What I would do is I would see how he's situated, how the bird is situated, he or she is situated. So basically what you need is you need a situation in which the bird is not triggered by environmental things. An African gray, and Amazons too, actually, any of the biters, but excuse me, but an African gray they do like a snake bite. It's like, it's a flash, and boy, you know, I mean, it's a surprise, and I know what he's talking about. What he has to do is look at the environment, because if he's going, or he's holding his bird, or he's going to go pick it up and it doesn't want to come out. Let's say he bites. So I like to know when he bites. Let's say if he doesn't want to come out, then you say, oh, you don't want to come out right now. If he like backs away, it's okay. He might be telling you, hey, it's close to my nap time, or I just want to rest a little bit, or I want to play with my toy more. And so, or I want to eat a little something. So what you do is say, oh, you don't want to come out? Okay. And you shut the door, and then you back away instead of pressing him, unless he doesn't let you pick him up at all, in which case then you have to kind of learn how to drill it so that he gets on your hand when you want him to. So what you can do is look also at your surroundings and see if there's anything. Like, often when you're holding a bird, often you'll get bitten if, let's say, you live where there's traffic, you know, and even the traffic doesn't have to be at your level. It can be, I remember a client of mine who lived in Los Angeles, in the Beverly Hills area, where it's hills, and their house was on a knoll, and then there was a busy street going beside it. And what I noticed was that they were wondering why their bird started feather picking. They'd had it for, you know, a year or so. And all of a sudden it got real jumpy. And then it also then started to screech and it became bitey and it didn't want to come out of its cage. Well, what happened was that we were seeing that when the cars went by certain times of the afternoon, certain cars, depending on the pitch of their windshields, the lights were dancing across the roof and the bird was going, because anything from above like that that they can't define could be a predator. They're triggered for that. They're hardwired for that. So all we did was just cover the top of the cage, just the top, and no problems after that. I had also a I think it might have been in gray. This was like 35, 40 years ago now, this one, but it was interesting to me because it became really agitated and was starting to screech and just act weird and nervous. And it turned out that it was in the fall and there were crows. You know, crows change their migratory, not migratory, but their patterns of where they tend to stay during different times of the year. And in the fall, they'll flock to other areas. And they had just started to flock to this area because there were a lot of like eucalyptus trees and everything around. But there was a phone line outside this tall window. It was one of those bedroom windows that they used to make in houses in the 60s and 70s. You know, those narrow, there'd be one up high on a back wall. It was narrow like that. And the bird had a nice big cage. It was right next to the desk that one of the man and the woman would work at. But what was happening is those crows were right there. And I said, just cover the top of the cage. And that's all they did. And the bird was fine. You know, absolutely fine. The bird, I remember when they brought it out for me to see, it was a gray. I remember it was falling asleep because it had been so stressed by all day watching those crows coming and going that it was exhausted. And here I was, a stranger. The man had it on his shoulder right next to me. And I was, this far away. And I was taking notes and watching the bird and talking to it and everything else. And it was falling asleep. And I said, do you see how exhausted he is? Aww. And an exhausted bird is going to be biting, or a bird that sees a quick movement is going to bite. The other thing is that where the cage is located, as far as a path of traffic in the house. So let's say that someone's walking through a doorway where they're brushing from a blind area, you're brushing by the cage all the time. Bird doesn't want to come out of the cage, they'll bite. Or they don't want to go near a particular area that they feel is threatening, and they'll bite. Another similar, let me see, I was trying to think, there was one other thing that flashed in my brain and then it just left. Anyway, that was another thing. I had a client who had a cockatoo, and all of a sudden it started to become wintertime in California, and this was down in Orange County, and all of a sudden the bird started becoming really upset at night and agitated and started making noises, and then it was starting to feather pick. And so what I did was I asked them to see how they set up the bird at night. And I sat in the dark with the bird and I just talked to the people in the dark while I was sitting there. And they lived in one of these neighborhoods where there's a main street and there was a wall to the neighborhood. So you didn't really see the main street, but it came into the neighborhood and then there was like a T. So there were houses this way and then to the left and to the right. These people were the first house when they made a turn to the left. So when a car came in, the headlights, they had the bird in like the dining area, right off the kitchen where the family spent a lot of time. But between the curtain and the wall, the lights would shine when somebody would make a left turn. And it would shine on the wall opposite, frightening that cockatoo. And then the other thing that happened, we sat there longer and I saw the heater kicked on. They had floor vents and the drapes were lifting.
Oh, sounds like a haunted house.
Yeah. And so all we did was just change the situation for the bird, dark covers. And so he was darkly covered. He wasn't any more bothered by any of this. That was all. He was just, it was a plea for help.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of things could be scary that we don't find scary, but
Exactly. And so that's where I like to teach people to step inside of their bird's head and look at the world from the bird's point of view. And like I said, one of the biggest causes of problems is having a bird within 3 feet. Don't worry about it. No. My friend was going to bring Leola's out for me, and she's wanting to eat right now. So I was like, no, that's fine. My yellowneck. Anyway, so this is another thing. My yellowneck didn't want to come out right now. And so it's like, okay, she's eating now. That tells me, all right, she doesn't want to come out. So I respect that. Not if it was 100% of the time, but I respect it. But anyway, so now I lost my train of thought, but I wanted to tell her because she was standing there doing anyway, so I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
oh no.
About the path of traffic. If your bird is within 3 feet of people walking by like this, or if you notice that they're really uncomfortable during the night or whatever, look at their environment and see what's going on. So, and the other thing with men, especially, is that I find that they often, their body language is, oh, it's male body language. And one of the things I have to teach people is that I find that women have a better time picking up birds because they come to the bird like this, very gracefully and in a sweeping motion. Men do this. Get on, buddy. I mean, it's like boom. And the bird's like, whoa, that's his natural. He can't help it. It's hardwired. When something moves close to you really fast, you go the other direction, And so it's where a lot of times they're giving their birds like little heart attacks all day long and they don't even know it. So I'm sorry to sound so vague, but these are all things when you're really working with behavior, really working with it. I don't like training them out of a behavior that they're doing because they feel stressed.
Okay.
I'd rather adjust their environment so they're happy. And then most of the time they're fine. Or we can then work with them to get them to be more comfortable with coming out if they've gotten so kind of PTSD'd that they don't want to come out anymore,
Yeah.
I like to make them comfortable. And I don't like them in a situation where something's going to trigger fear or discomfort. So if he wants to, he can email me through Lafeber Company and give me a little more history, and I'll give him a few more pointers.
Okay.
That's when you're working with behavior, you have to look at the whole picture.
Yeah. So then our next question comes from Frank. He has a blue front that's 3.4 years old, and I like the exactness of that. And is fearful. Blue front is 3.4 years old, is and fearful. Is Beth's method to use small approximations and shaping to step up and for recall training?
If he's fearful, one of the things one of the things when I'm working with behavior, I look at the history of the bird, where it came from, if it was owned by somebody else, what was the environment it was in before, and all these different things. If not, if the person has had this particular bird all the time, I would look again at the environment that he's in to see if there's anything that would make him feel uncomfortable. And that's close, quick movements, unexplained, like shadows or lights, like coming from the car, turning the corner. The little space between the curtain and the wall was enough to send it flashing during part of the living room with that cockatoo. I would see if there's some reason that this bird doesn't want to come out. Sometimes it's as simple as just having small children around. They're kind of jumping around, or rowdy dogs that are jumping around and are seen as a threat. And so they just don't want to come out. And they're nervous about being out of the cage. So with a bird like that, that's where, yes, excessive approximation, that's where I think training is at its very most useful, is in a situation whereby the bird is very nervous about something, and you can just, at his level, when he's comfortable with step one, you go to step two. When he's comfortable with step 2, you go to step 3. And with a bird like that, yes. You know, I use a combination, but yeah.
So Chris, I had a question about that. If we're training the step up cue, should you, if you have a bird that's not familiar with it or doesn't really want to cooperate with the step up, would you recommend that you always try with your hand or a perch? Is there
I would try, if this is a bird, now some birds are horrified by a perch, you know, by a stick being just put in there. And I guess I think you're going to beat them to death with it or something. I don't know, or it's a snake or something. I don't know, but they just don't like it. Or it's just a foreign object, because a foreign object can be dangerous to them. If it's a foreign object, they'll fly away. They'll look at it from a distance if it's not moving, try to figure out if it's a problem or not. And so it depends on the bird. If he's afraid of a stick, that's not going to work. But one of the things that I do, and where I'm different from most people, is that if this bird has been around people all the time, then I would sit down and I would just talk to it and tell it that I love it no matter what, and I would tell it. I think one of the things that I brought up the time before was that tell it how beautiful it is. All animals are vain, every one of them. And you just tell them, oh, look at your pretty little beak, and, you know, look at your pretty toes. And would you like a little piece of whatever, you know, some little treat, and have something, give little bits of it. Again, don't give him a cracker that's this big to him, you know, give him just little bits of something, you know, he likes. And the smaller, the better. You know, you might have to start out bigger if he's really afraid of hands, but the smaller, the better. And then what you can do is just work him toward even, what I used to do a lot of times is some birds are afraid of hands because maybe they've been grabbed, something like that. And what I would do is I would just go and I would like touch the perch, but the bird would be over here. And I just touch and go, oh, what's that? And I would just focus on the perch. And the bird would go from being like this and up against the other side to going like, what are you looking at on my perch? You know, and it would start to go. And I said, look at that. And maybe when I turned to look at them, maybe they back up and I'd look back at the perch again. And then I'd give them a little goodie, you know, or I'd have to maybe set it on the perch. But then where it had to take a little stretch toward me to get it, you know, and it would be just enough for a little bite that tasted good. You know, and so that type of thing, you can work with them in that way. So not knowing the history of this bird, successive approximation would be the most humane way to work with him.
Okay. And then our next question comes from Christine. I am new to parrot care and I'm trying to learn everything I can before bringing home a rescue parrot into my home. My question concerns body language. Every resource I've seen says pay close attention to your bird's body language, but then they don't go on to give much by way of specifics. This is frustrating and confusing for a new person. For example, I've seen a video of a cockatoo screaming and bobbing its head, and one person commented, oh, look at the happy bird. And another person wrote, oh, that poor bird is terrified. Any suggestions as to video courses that she could watch?
You know, I don't know, because I learned by the bootstraps, you know, with my grandmother's birds, and then the birds that I knew when I was a child coming up, and then working at Universal Studios, like, you know, all these different things, and working with the birds, they taught me directly. I think that watching whatever type of videos of the parrots in their own environment can be very helpful. So I don't watch that many videos like that, you know. I guess so. It's one of those things where each bird is different. If they know if she knows what kind of bird that she wants to get, or that she's looking to adopt, if there's a particular species, then I'd have her really just study those and see what's normal. And then some things kind of cross over. Like one of my birds, she'd laugh when things were funny. And I mean, she loved slapstick on TV, and she would laugh. But also if somebody was sobbing, you know, in a movie, just heartfelt sobbing, she'd start laughing. She thought it was laughter. So, you know, she was misinterpreting us. It's easier for us to misinterpret them. And I think that boots on the ground is the best way, is if she can go to some of these places or go to a rescue place, volunteer, you know, for just one day a week or half a day or something like that, and really get to know, because what you'll learn there too is what species of bird would suit her the best, and that she'd be the best mom for, because, you know, it depends on what her environment is.
Yeah.
And so in doing that, and that's, I think, the best, is if she can get around where there's an assortment of birds, if there's a bird club in her area, whatever, but if she can go where there's an assortment. And like I said, if there's a rescue, that's wonderful, because if she could just volunteer, even if it's a half a day on a Saturday, you know, that type of thing, but where she get to understand and say, because everybody starts out, you know, like, in the 1970s, everybody wanted cockatoos because they saw Beretta, which was a famous TV program, and everybody wanted the cockatoo. Well, I started out that way because my now, thank God, ex-husband wanted a cockatoo. But I went and saw everything I could see, and I went to a bird show, and it was owned by the man I ended up working for. And I met a blue and gold macaw, and my heart was lost. It was like, no, it's going to be a macaw, you know. And then I also knew Amazon and grays, you know, and those are, you know, that's my group to hang out with. But everybody has ones that they find, like, I think mealy Amazons. They're not a glamorous bird. They're big, kind of and they have kind of a dull covering, and they're the sweetest birds. Orange wings. Everybody loves orange wings who's ever had them, because they're a sweeter Amazon.
Yeah.
And Amelia's a real just like kickback Amazon, you know? And yet Amazons as a rule are kind of real high powered and, you know, crazy, and they're the daredevils. And so as this person gets to know, as Christine gets to know, she'll start to see certain traits, and she'll say, oh, you know what? Yeah, I thought I wanted this, but darn, I keep getting drawn. That's how I ended up with 2 Malteses. You know, it was just at this stage of my life. I mean, I've had Great Danes. I've rescued everything in my life, and I'm now they're the dogs of my heart. You know, so I think for her to not just read or watch videos, but to go where they are. Right now, it's a little hard, I understand, but just even going, you know, if they're eventually where you can go to, you know, a bird store or something and just volunteer.
Yeah.
You know, and I volunteered at the shows at first, then they hired me, but because I wanted to learn, and I was willing to take my days off and do that rather than just staying home, because I knew I'd never ever live my life without birds.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, so we have our last question for this session, and that comes from Eileen. She says, I have a 25-plus-year-old African gray who suffers from PTSD. He came to me as a rehomed abused bird, and he is currently on haloperidol for anxiety. The biggest problem is that he's extremely stressed by anything new, and he needs to get a new cage because he has arthritis in his feet, and I can't even put a new perch in. Any suggestions for Eileen?
Okay, that's going to be, oh, you know, little ones like that. A lot of times what I do is I tell people, don't handle them. You know, I mean, it's have them just be comfortable with being who they are. I had adopted an African gray, and then a blue and gold macaw that had both had terrible past. And it got to the point where I could scratch their heads and stuff, but they never really wanted to get out with me. You know, even though they'd see the other birds and I was okay with them, and the other birds loved being with me and being out with me, And I just respected that. I thought, they've already been through so much, you know. But what you might be able to do, since he's arthritic, is I don't know whether his cage is one where you can take, some of them have a bottom rack that you can actually lift off. And with my Amazon, who's 40 years old, I took the bottom tray, which was a rack, after she had a stroke. And I put it up so her cage is only this high on the inside. Now she's gotten way better and she can climb up and down and stuff, but I've left it that way because during the day I'm here. And so she climbs up and down on a regular cage, and she got to be able to do that as her feet got better. And then I would do a lot of talking to this bird. I would make sure, in fact, I would like, if possible, I'd like them just to send me some pictures of it and give me a history on the bird, because this is a bird where we have to set it up in a way where there's absolutely no unexpected stimulus, like somebody coming from a blind area or whatever. We want to give this bird complete security inside of his cage, and so that he can start to become curious about the world between him and the cage, or so that he feels like, okay, I'm in a good place, nothing bad's going to happen, nothing unexpected. And so I've rescued so many animals in my life. I mean, all different kinds. And I just have a really soft spot for these ones that have been through hell. Yeah. And so please have them write me, and let's see. It might take me a while because it might take us going back and forth with stuff for a while. But ones like this, my heart breaks because there's no reason for them to be that way, and it's usually human induced, but often we can get them where they're having a happy life and they're comfortable, but they'll never be one to come out and join the party. They'll be quieter, and you love them for that. But
okay.
Real quick, I know we got to go, but real quick, I would start telling him how pretty his beak was. Your beak is so pretty, and you have such pretty little toes. I love your toes, they're so pretty. What that does, it focuses it takes his focus away from you and what's going on outside, and he goes, oh, did you tell me I have nice toes? Did you tell me I have a nice beak? Oh, she finds I'm pretty, beautiful eyes, So that's doing that sort of thing, and just keeping movement small, not expansive at all, which I'm presuming they already do, but still, so, just say, oh, such pretty toes. And you look straight at the toes. There's such a pretty beak, and you look at, at the beak and the eyes. It's interesting because there's something in what you're conveying. The best I could use it would be energetically. We're all electrical field. Our nervous system is electrical. I think they feel when we're just coming in with telling them they're wonderful, just the way they are. I tell people, tell them they're beautiful just for standing still, breathing and pooping. They're not screaming. They're not tearing up anything. They're not making your life miserable. Tell them they're wonderful during those times. And then if, like, there's company or whatever, it's going to be coming over, then that's where I would probably have it where I could roll the bird into another room, or, have his cage partially covered all the time, so he only has a limited amount of world to have to deal with. This is not a bird that I would leave with a 360 situation or even a 180. I'd give him a 45 degree for the time being, up to maybe 90 degree area open. And then the rest of it I keep covered where he can move away out of this area. And then as you do that, he relaxes. That's when you can start adjusting things with his cage. But if you can bring the bottom up, he can have the same perch he has now. If it falls off, he's falling 2 inches. And that's what I did with mine. And then, because what gives him the PTSD, or what perpetuates that, is falling off the perch and falling a long distance. And the other thing they can do, if they can't bring the bottom up like that, with him feeling fearful, it'll be a little harder, but you can take, how most cages have got, several bars coming around sideways too, along with the longitudinal, you have the latitudinal ones. And what you can do is maybe put like a couple of flat slats, like wooden slats there between bars, maybe 3 of them, and then have a little wooden floor cut to measure, lay that on top, and then put the regular papers or whatever medium you put on the bottom there. And then that would bring the bottom of the cage again up to where if he falls, he's falling 2 inches. But every time he falls, that reinforces the PTSD. So by just bringing up the floor in his existing cage, then that gives him a chance to kind of exercise his little feet and move around, but you've got him still in the same cage. You know, again, this is somebody, have him get in touch with me through Lafeber, because I little ones like this, I want to make their lives better, you know. So anyway, thank you everybody.
Well, I'm gonna announce. I'm gonna announce today's winner. So it's always a have. So today's winner is Jackie G. So Jackie, you are going to be. They're going to contact you, the office, the Lafeber office, on Monday to send you out a bag of the newest diet, the tropical fruit pellets, as well as your bird's choice. So congratulations, Jackie. And then wait, just real quick. So I'm going to announce next week's webinar, and we are going to be, it's a different time, a special time next week, 11:30 a.m. So we'll be moving it up a half hour for next Friday. And that's going to be from head to tail, visual clues to your pet bird's health. And that's going to be with Dr. Stephanie Lamb. So make sure you tune into that. That'll give us a nice, parameter to go with on how to stay in tune with our bird's health. And Chris, before we go, I wanted to read you this. I saw this pop up, and where did it go? Oh gosh, let me see here. I have to find it. It was from someone who knew you from helped them with their African gray. She had a comment that it was so true, though. It was about, let me see. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through these comments here. I thought it was on my screen, and now I don't see it anymore. She was saying that it was great to see you, and also that you look like the mother of all birds. And I just, yeah, that was.
That's sweet.
I thought that was a very sweet comment. But so I think that's a sentiment that many people feel. So. Thank you for all that insight today. I think we will probably have to do another one of these. So we got a lot more questions for you on how people can make their birds' lives better. So.
Well, and I want to thank everybody for showing up. I know this has been such a crazy time with the pandemic and all these other things going on and holidays right between. But I thank all of you for taking time out of your day to listen to me. And if there's anything that you'd like to have me cover in the future or whatever, please let them know at Lafeber Company. But I do appreciate all of you, and thank you for loving your birds enough to spend time learning more about them and how to interact with them. And as I tell everybody, love them for what they are, not for what we want them to be.
Okay. Yeah, okay. That's great. And we got a lot of people commenting. Thank you so much. So everyone, obviously, they love your insight on birds.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Care.
So we'll be back hopefully sooner than later. We'll see you. And in the meantime, everybody, have a great weekend. Stay safe, and all the best to you and your flock. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.